All right, everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're gonna do a little bit of a Q&A. So I got these questions from my Instagram account. Every once in a while I post my story, having people ask me questions, and I'll answer it there in written form. But I figured I'd put a little video together of some of those more important questions, go more in depth and do it in video form. So we'll get right into it. The first question someone asks is, why did the South Regionals roster get taken down? So I'll preface that by saying I'm not the meet director, so I don't know all the ins and outs of why they did it. But I'll tell you kind of in general some of the pros and cons of having the roster public versus not for a meet director. So for myself, one of the pros is that people email me less asking questions when the roster is public. So when I used to have it where it was hidden, people would email me wanting to sign up saying, hey, how many spots are left for this day or this session? Or hey, are you still taking registrations? And even when I did have people already signed up, they were asking me, oh, how many lifters are in my session? They want to know what flight they're in. They want to check and make sure they're in the right weight class or want to change their weight class, depending on what they signed up for maybe months ago. So having it public, they can go on there I use LiftingCast, so they can go to liftingcast.com, find my meet, and they can see it whenever they want, how many lifters there are, how many that are in their session, check all the registration information, make sure it's correct, and not have to be bothering me with emails all the time. Some of the downsides to that though is when lifters do know how many people are signing up for the competition and they do know what the cap is, then they know how close it is to getting full. So lifters may wait to the last minute to sign up. So for a larger meet, like maybe regionals or nationals, it could be disadvantageous that people know how close to the cap you are, if there is one, because then they'll just wait to sign up, and they might wait to sign up at the very end, which can sometimes be 3 or 4 weeks out from the competition. So then the meet director gets bombarded with all these entries, and maybe they're not prepared for it as far as the number of platforms they need, the volunteers, the medals, the shirts, all that kind of stuff. So the earlier that you can set up everything and prepare everything based on the number of entries you currently have, and you think you're going to have a small jump leading up to the deadline, and then it's easier to handle. But if you get all that rush in last minute, then it's going to be very difficult to make those adjustments. Some of the other cons are that people will constantly change their weight class or division. So they'll kind of see, okay, I'm in the 93 kilo open class and there's 10 lifters, but if I go into the 105 open class, there's only 2 lifters. So let me email the meet director and switch. And maybe 4 other people do that. So now the 93s are down to 6, and then all of a sudden the 105s have more lifters. So then maybe someone who switched from the 93s to 105s is like, oh, can you put me back in the 93s? So you constantly get this email bombardments from lifters wanting to switch their weight class, wanting to switch their age division, add another age division, add push-pull because there's no one in the push-pull. They know they're going to win best lifter, all that kind of stuff. So it can get a little bit annoying in that way. All right, we're going to go to our next question. Similar to the previous question regarding regionals, people are asking, is Northeast Regionals canceled? So as of now, it is not canceled. And another idea I might do is kind of like every once in a while put a video together going over powerlifting news or like updates in our powerlifting world of what's going on. Because while some things may be public or some things people may discuss, everyone doesn't know about it. So as of now, Northeast Regionals is not canceled, only Midwest is. But obviously the meet can't happen on its original date. I believe it was July 15th because the Northeast is basically shut down. The gyms are closed, people can't train. There's limits on the size that you can have in a gathering, in a venue, all that kind of stuff. So the meet director, Big Mike, is trying to figure out what he can do as far as postponing it or canceling it is always an option. But if he wants to postpone it, he's trying to figure out what the USAPL and the exec committee will allow him to do, whether you can have it after nationals, either after open nationals or even after raw nationals. Because one of the things about regionals is that you get that handicap and it can qualify you for those nationals. So if you put it after nationals, it takes that away. But that may be the only option for that region just because it's been shut down for so long. And a lot of the places like New York City and Boston may be shut down still through June and into July, who knows how long. And then the lifters need to get back in the gym and start training again and have 2, 3, 4 months to prepare for that competition. So as of now, it's not canceled, but it may be canceled, it may be postponed. Either way, whatever happens, if it is postponed or is combined with another meet, Big Mike will give the option to the people that are currently signed up, whether you want to compete in that other meet, whether you want to compete in another one of his meets that he runs, whether you want a partial refund, different options like that. All right, we'll go to our next question. So this one's a little bit more of a technique question and a little bit more in depth, but I'll try and keep it as short as possible, and then you have to kind of go and figure things out yourself. So how do I fix bar drifting forward in the squat? So when you ask a question like that and there's no context to it, there's no video to it, it's very hard to say, okay, for sure it's this one thing, this is what only thing that happens, and this is what always happens. There can be different things that happen that result in this depending on when it occurs and how it occurs. So for example, you may have your bar go down perfectly straight on the way down, but then on the way up, you kind of go forward and then you have to pull yourself back. So if something like that happens, then it could be a lack of tightness at the bottom. So if you're bouncing too hard out of the hole, you're not staying tight, then that force is throwing you out of position, and then you have to fight yourself to get back into position. So it could just be maybe controlling your descent, maintaining your bracing and your tightness to be able to transfer that force out of the bounce of the bottom into the bar and directly in the vertical direction. Another thing that could happen is, for example, you're going down straight for half of the range of motion, and then you go forward in the bottom half, and then again forward on the top half, the bottom half coming up, and then straight again towards the top. So if you are drifting forward like that in that bottom range of motion, then it could maybe be a mobility issue. So maybe halfway down during the squat, you are lacking mobility in the joints, maybe in the ankle, maybe in the hips, maybe in the hip flexors, that kind of stuff, some muscles around those joints that are locking up, or even the joint itself, the bones are locking up and it's pushing you out of position. So then you might have to look into, well, can I increase my flexibility of certain muscles, or maybe mobility in certain joints, or maybe you have to change your stance. So some people, if they go a very, very narrow stance, they're going to be limited in their range of motion, versus if they take a moderate stance, they're going to have very good range of motion. And then if you go to some kind of extreme max stance, then again, you're going to have limited range of motion. Same thing with your toe angle. If your toes are pointed directly forward, you may have more of a limited range of motion, versus if you point them out a little bit more, you're going to have a little bit more range of motion. So it's working with those different variables of your stance width, your toe angle, your mobility, if that is an issue. So my recommendation always is filming your lifts, especially if you train by yourself, you don't have your coach there. Film your lifts. If you film directly from the side, you're going to be able to see the bar path. And then if you want to kind of see when it happens, well, then you should be filming some of your warm-ups as well. So if this issue is happening when you're at 40%, 50%, 60%, all the way up to 80, 90, and 100%, then it could be something where you just lack the technique. You don't know how to squat correctly with the vertical bar path, or it could be, like I said, a mobility issue that's happening regardless of weight. Whereas if it's something that's only happening at the heavier weights, so 40, 50, 60, 70, 80%, you're perfectly fine. Once you get to 90% and up, then you're drifting forward. Then it could be that the closer you are getting to your max, or closer getting to failure, then your technique is breaking down. So like I said, maybe then you are losing your bracing and you're losing your tightness, and the higher the weight is, the more it's throwing you out of position and it's beating you in the battle, versus with 50%, you're able to kind of maintain position and absorb that force. So some things to look into. All right, going into our next question. Is squatting ass to grass bad for my back? So again, this is a very broad question and there's not a lot of context to it, so you have to figure out the context for you. So everyone has a different full range of motion, a different range of motion that's healthy for you, different range of motion that might put you slightly at risk, and a different range of motion where you are just kind of like rounding your back and just kind of losing all kind of tightness and positioning to get down to, if it is your ass to grass, all the way bottoming out. So you have to figure out what is the correct range of motion for you, for the stance width, the toe angle, all the stuff you use, for any past or current injuries you have, and then determine, okay, this is how much range of motion I can do in a squat. That is regardless of what it is for competition. So competition is just arbitrary. We have to get the hip crease below the top of the knee, and that is universal for everyone. But what is correct for you and what's healthy for you is not that arbitrary standard that someone made up. So then you have to see whatever your range of motion is for you, whether it lines up with the competition, if you are a powerlifter or a weightlifter or whatever, whether it matches up with that, or if you need to do something to kind of adjust to be able to hit that competition standard. And for some people at a certain age, maybe, especially like lifters when they get older and maybe rack up more injuries, then their range of motion is basically going to be much higher, for example, let's say in the squat, than the competition standards. And so then that's when they have to decide, is it worth the risk to kind of continue competing and doing those movements, or is it time to maybe retire from the sport and then just do like general health lifting with whatever range of motion that's safe for you. All right, next question. I get this asked often, how much do you travel for meets in a year? So it differs, and it's been going up obviously year after year. So maybe back in 2014 and 2015, maybe I was going to 5 to 10 meets a year, and then 2016, 2017, maybe 10 to 15 meets a year. And then now lately, 2018, 2019, somewhere around 20 or slightly above 20 meets a year. And all the meets differ in length, so some of them might just be 1 or 2 days if it's just like a local meet in Florida. Some of them might be a longer, like if I go to a North American Championship, it might be a week long when you include the travel time, the setup, the meetings, then the meet itself, and then breaking down and kind of going home. And same thing with a World Championship. It might be a week if I come in early for the sub juniors and juniors and maybe a referee, and then coach all the way through the open and then stay for the banquet and then kind of go back. It might turn into 7-10 days when you put it all together. So it is over 20 meets a year, and then some of them are longer than just that weekend. So it might be basically half the year that I'm kind of either going to a competition, I'm at a competition, coming back or something like that. And then half the year is just kind of like, at home, kind of catching up on everything. Next question. I get this asked often as well. How did you end up as the national team coach? So the short answer is that I applied for it and they voted and picked me. The long answer for it is that you need to spend time kind of going up the ranks. So you might be coaching your own lifters first at local meets, then you might be coaching your own lifters at a national meet, then you might get on as a personal coach for your lifter at a international competition, or maybe you become an assistant team coach for a head coach at an international competition. And once you do that and you kind of built up your resume and you gained experience, you've taken the USAPL coaching course, then you can put in your resume when they are opening up applications. Typically, it is a 3-year term for the national team coaches. So you just wait and see when those 3-year terms are up and they're taking applications for new coaches, and you put in for that. So that's what I did going into 2016, and I became the sub-junior and junior national team coach for the team that competes at the Classic Powerlifting Worlds. So I did that 2016, 2017, 2018 for my 3-year term. And then once they were taking applications again, I put in for the open coach as my first priority, and then my own team, the sub-juniors and juniors, as my second priority. And so then the executive committee votes on it and they pick me for the open. So now I have my 3-year term, 2019, 2020, and 2021 as the open coach. And then once that's up, then I can decide whether I want to stay with open, whether I want to switch to another team, or whether I just want to kind of like pass it up to someone else to try it out. All right, so that is all the questions for today. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any further questions or details you want on the whatever I answered here, you can comment below and I will try and explain a little bit further if need be. And if you have any questions that you want me to discuss in future Q&As, then also you can comment that below and I'll take note of it, and hopefully it'll pop up in the next one. All right, see you.